Hello, this is Elliot Vella's video logs, episode 2. The title's called Borderline Personality, God Can Restore You. Now, this is something that is personal to me. I have found out over the last few years that I have it, and I was on a journey for a long time trying to figure out what was going on with me, and thought it was a bunch of different things. Knew I had some trauma to deal with, and went down the ADHD road and the bipolar. Thought maybe it's just a lot of trauma. Went to a lot of therapy for a while, and it can be a lot of those things. Don't have bipolar, but they're quite similar in a way. But yeah, borderline personality. I sort of did a fair bit of research and sort of figured out that that's something that I have. How does it happen? I guess it's something that you can develop, and it's got a lot to do with your childhood and how you coped growing up, and it's something that it can be a really positive thing. It comes with a lot of positive things because you're a healer in a way, and you want everyone else not to suffer, and you want everyone to be okay, and so you keep the peace, and you grow up looking after other people. You sort of become a bit like the forgotten child a little bit, but also you're like the sweetheart as well. Everyone has like a soft place in their heart for you, and you care about everybody a lot, especially in your family, and you have a big heart, and that's really a blessing that comes with it. But I guess, coming from a personal experience, I held a lot of things in, and that doesn't help anyone, because you're keeping peace with everyone on the surface, but inside you're angry, and it adds up. And I started writing in a journal, and the first journal was, there's a lot of anger and hate and sadness in it, and I held on to things, and I tried to let them go, and I think that, like, I thought that I let things go, but looking back on it, I don't think I did. I think I held on to a lot of things, a lot of pain, a lot of unhappy thoughts, and they stay with you, and you still go back and you see family and you see friends, and you hold it all together, and you talk about all the good things, and peaceful and loving, and you listen a lot, and you always see goodness in other people, but then afterwards you feel drained, and afterwards you're left with all these thoughts, and and then you sort of you're annoyed, and you're angry and pissed off, and I remember myself, after moments of people and family and some friends, you're just like, I don't want to see that person again for a while, and so you're not real, you're not real in the moment. You sort of, you have this face, and this face, and you're caring, and you do care, and you're not even trying to be like this, but yeah, you sort of, you send a lot of love, you see the goodness, you're helping everyone, but you sort of, um, you're sort of enabling this false ego in other people, and then you have this persona yourself that's false as well. And yeah, so I think it's very unhealthy, and you're left with, as an adult, like, well, the worst sides of it was just emptiness, anger towards people, grudges. I think it's, I've read about it a bit, and it's got like covert narcissism. You know, you sort of nasty without even knowing that you are being nasty. And but I think it's just because deep down inside you're hurt and you're angry, and then so you're sort of cold. You got this coldness about you, where you can just cut people off, and you don't even sort of see it in yourself for a long time, but then you've got this switch that you can just cut people off, and that's pretty cold, and that's pretty dark. So how do you know if you have it? Well, some things that I've experienced is that, I used to think I had like some sort of mood disorder. I went to a therapist for a while and a psychiatrist, and like I said, I thought I had bipolar for a while, because I would just, have these, I would be excited. I was usually like around people. I never really had falling outs with anyone. So I kept a lot of stuff in, but then my things were extreme excitement, and, growing up, like drinking, I was like wild, wild with the drinks and parties, and even older, a friend would come down, and I just have all this excitement, I'd be buying everyone drinks, and, just chat with a friend all night, but I'd overdrink, and I'd just pass out, and then there was these moments, I guess, where, like I said, I'd be real social for like 3 months, hanging out to a point where I drained myself completely, and then I would be like, you wouldn't see me for 3 months, and I'd just go for these like sort of spurts, I've done that my whole life, and I just, I would drain myself keeping everyone happy and together and everything like that, and then I would just sort of switch off, and be like, and drained, and I think, other telltale signs is that, like, always needed advice, always needed advice, and I had a lot of anxiety, especially in the relationships that I was in. They were quite, with people that were quite, controlling, and not a lot of narcissistic tendencies, and so I would sort of just be pleasing them, and I would get a lot of anxiety and walking on eggshells, around them, and trying to please them, and then I'd just get to a point where, like, screw this, like, this is, I'd do it for a long time and then just sort of be done, and the way I would be done would be just, be doing my own thing for a while, or in relationships, I'd keep the peace for a while and walk on eggshells, and then I'd just crack it, and I would just be, and then once I had cracked it, in in my head in a way, and just be like, it wasn't very like on the outward experience. It'd be like, try and, I think about a situation with like a partner, my first partner, wife, ex-wife, I would, we'd be having discussions and have an argument, and then I would just keep like, okay, let's not ruin the night, and try and keep it together, and then it would just drag out, and, she wouldn't, just work with me, and then it was like, I'm done now, and then she'd be like, okay, come on, let's get it together, and by that point I was like, nah, I'm done, like I can't hang out now tonight, and I wouldn't say much, but you could tell with my mood, and I was sort of like, other people would get angry and show their emotions more, and where I would like be happy, positive, and then it get to a point where, just my tone of voice would change, and you could tell like, my mum used to always say like, he's, I'm stubborn with just like, not much, but when I don't want to do something, I won't change, from there. And so it's like, but it had this coldness to it, and yeah, I guess so. If you ever have any of those sort of similar things go on in your life, and your sort of emotions and your anxiety, and they sort of just overtake you, and so I had a lot of vices, and always smoked a lot of weed, and alcohol a little bit. I think a big one for me later in life, used to always have a fair bit of nicotine and stuff with weed, but yeah, later in life, nicotine has been the one, and a lot of people with borderline personality smoke cigarettes and vape, and because it's just, you just can't get a hold of your mood, and you could be, when I wasn't good, it would be hard for me. I would sort of just like get into a point where I'm like, I get stuck, and I would miss a day of work or something, and sort of, I would get depressed, and then and then I'd be like, I sort of feel it in my body, like, oh, if you don't get back to work, soon, or even a day or something, then I'm gonna be, and then it's 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and I'm just sort of, I was always fixing things like around the house, building things, had projects, creative projects. So I did a lot of art, a lot of music, and I would just sort of do that, and it was because just my mood, my state of mind, it was just like, I drained myself. Now I need to get myself good, and I need to, and weed and all the vices don't help, but like, you just would be totally like in another world, in a well as well, like, and yeah, sort of like dissociate, in a way, and I would go into this world with my drawings and with my art and with my music, and it was like my happy place. But then I look back on it, and I wasn't really happy, in those moments. I was creating something, but I had to like get into that fantasy world, and the things I created were really creatively, cool. Everyone always liked the music that I made, and made it with, and played in bands a lot, and it was always creative. I used to paint guitar effect pedals, my mate used to make them, and then a lot of art, and did posters, and CD covers, and just always drawing. Always had a drawing book for years, and I'd be in a social event and just have my drawing book and be drawing there, and then hang out as well, and then I was doing graffiti a lot, And but I needed that, that was my happy place in a way. But I smoked a lot of weed doing that. Um, and so it was something that I was proud of, and it was something that I knew that could keep me happy, and that could keep me. I always had that outlet, I really needed an outlet, and but after a while, and when I sort of when I got saved, and when I Jesus came into my life, and I stepped back from all of that. I just had this sort of big realization that that was, and I felt it as well when it was happening, that it wasn't really making me happy. It was not real. It was not a real place. And it's cool to create art and create things with your emotions, and I always had heaps of emotions and strong, feelings about things, and so I could sort of, just like express myself that way. But it was pain, it was a lot of pain, and that world I would go into, it was like to get away from reality, and yeah, it was quite a sad place to be in a way. And I'd have to smoke a lot of weed to get in that place, or even if I didn't, if I went to draw, and paint or create music, it was always about, the music was always about pain, and art, the drawings that I created they're quite trippy, and quite like, good to smoke weed and look at, and you could just let your eyes roll, and they would just, you create things, but like, in reality, and I look back, and there's demons in my head, like, and people say that, and it literally were, my drawings were like, it looked like some demons sometimes, and sometimes it was just like, I always loved monsters, and aliens and robots, and and machines, and and patterns. I always loved a lot of patterns, but yeah, it was all just fantasy world, and there's nothing wrong with having fantasies and having creative expression and having that place, but yeah, I look back, and it was just a way of expressing myself and finding a place out of this reality that was, and like the drawings and stuff, they're just trippy, and they're just, there's darkness in my head, and you could sort of see it in my drawings as well, and so, okay, so what are some symptoms, what are some symptoms in daily life that would sort of show you that you have, borderline personality? I sort of talked about a few, always having a vice, needing a vice, and without having a vice, that's one of them as well. Cigarettes would sort of keep my mood level, and it's hard to explain, it's hard to explain how you feel, and you don't even know. I think the biggest thing is your identity, you sort of, you don't know who you are sometimes, and that's sort of a scary place to be, and you sort of have this, false identity in a way, but it's not, because you're a pretty real person, you're a pretty down-to-earth person, but yeah, you don't know who you are, sometimes, and that's a really weird place to be. And you sort of always had, creative things going on, and got into graphic design and entrepreneurial, things, and it's always fun. And I could easily sort of put my head down, and I could work through the night easy, in whatever I was doing, and if I was passionate about it, I could just push through and create things, and and then, but, so these are sort of like, there's good sides to that. But you want that to come from a place that you can sustain, and if you need, to get into that place, like, cigarettes and weed and, whatever it is, alcohol, like, you can't sustain that for like a long period of time, and you end up, getting into a pretty dark place pretty easy. And so, yeah, I guess some symptoms in daily life, are just that, those things where you sort of have to step away from people for a while, where you start having a short wick, getting into narcissistic relationships, and codependency as well. They sort of become, you do anything to keep that, that person close, because you don't have grounding within yourself, and you sort of think you do, and you're pretty strong in things, but you sort of very weak in things as well, and the stepping away for months at a time, the always having a vice, the identity, not knowing who you are. They're all sort of some symptoms, and so, like we're sort of saying, there's blessings and there's curses, and I guess there's some of the curses and the blessings right there, really, like all the creativity and the, and the empathy and the caring and the love, that you can bring, and they're all the blessings, and I've always had people say, like, you can talk to anybody, and I like meeting people and talking to people, and connecting with people, and there's a realness, that you have with borderline personality, because, you sort of, you grew up connecting with people and finding good in them, and sort of looking over the, you can always, I said this to a friend, and I believe it, there's always something good in someone, you can always find a piece of goodness in someone, and it's true, there is goodness in everybody, and we all have trauma, and I've been really, really hurt and betrayed before, but I still know there's goodness in those people, and you step away, a lot of hurt people, we all have some trauma, and we can go into these default mechanisms, of personality traits, or personality disorders in a way, or generational trauma patterns, and there is a person behind those, though, and a soul, and so, yeah, there is blessings to it, and there's curses, and at the end of the day, they reckon it's one of the hardest personality disorders to heal and to restore. And I don't know anyone, I've watched a lot of videos, a few years ago when I sort of researched it a bit, and there's people that get themselves to a pretty good place, they get out of, they always usually in toxic relationships, and they get themselves to a pretty good place. They're still usually smoking cigarettes. They usually have like some creative business or something going, but they still battle. They still battle with the disorder, and their sort of partner helps them. And they sort of work together, and so it's super depressing when you sort of hear that and you find that out, and and you're like, okay, maybe, when I learned about that, I was like, okay, I just needed a good partner to sort of be able to work with me, and understand my trauma and my patterns, and now, now that I've been saved and I have God, and what Jesus has done with me, without me even knowing, knowing that he was doing it, and working through that trauma and working through that pain, and like he's healing me, you know, and he has healed me so much. And it's wild because I don't think anything else in the world can do that, you know. And you can go to therapy for years. I went to therapy. I've been to like 7 or 8 different therapists and a couple of psychiatrists and, you know, psychologists, you know, counselors, um, and you know, the place I was in about a year and a couple of months ago, you know, like is I was in survival mode. I was keeping all my, you know, my stuff at bay, you know, but I was in a dark place, you know. And if it was up, I would like I don't think I would be here, you know. I don't think I wouldn't be here if Jesus hadn't come into my life, you know, and I hadn't prayed that night, and you know, and really asked God for help, and he's turned my life around, and he's such a good friend, you know, and such a beautiful creator. And you know, without me knowing it and going on this journey, you know, and having this sort of spiritual awakening, you know, I didn't even realize what Jesus was doing, you know. And he doesn't take you away from your pain, but he's there with you, you know, in it. And he sort of teaches you with people and with pain, and you know, even these times that I've sort of, you know, have failed, you know, and I've, you know, I was on a good road and I got off the cigarettes and the weed and all that, you know, the alcohol and everything for like, you know, on this journey of getting clean and getting healthy, you know. And like I would do it for 4 or 5 months, and then I would just like, you know, I would fall, you know, and for a month or two and just fall into it and just like need something to sort of like, you know, something would trigger me, you know. And that's another thing about borderline personality. It's like you get triggered and then you just like impulsive, you know, and go buy some cigarettes, go buy some weed, go, you know, just like you're not even thinking about it. You are, but you're just like, I just need to do this right now. Go buy things, you know. And you know, I don't know how much is borderline personality and ADHD as well, and but I think it's just trauma and pain as well, you know. And you can form these sort of personality habits and you know, personality disorders, and they're hard to heal, you know. And but Jesus is working in the background, you know, through these things and teaching me through people. And I look at it now, you know, like I'm still on the journey, but man, I've like had so many peaceful days, you know. It's been a year and a few months, and you know, I had a crazy year last year, but like still had peace, you know. I've never had so much peace in my life since the last year and a bit, you know. And I have peace now, you know, and still have tricky times because I'm still sort of on the journey, but it's nothing compared to what it was. And I look back and just see how much pain I was in, you know, and see how much suffering, and see how alone and empty I felt, you know. I felt so empty, you know, and you don't even know what it is, you know. You don't even know, but now I look back and know, you know, and I don't feel like that anymore, you know. And like Jesus, if you just let him into your life and into your soul and into your spirit, like he really heals you, you know, and gives you purpose and meaning. And he's the only real cure, you know. And like I said, you can go through therapy, and I've watched heaps of, you know, videos and documentaries and stuff on it, and I haven't seen anyone cured, you know. I haven't seen a person cured, and I feel cured, you know. And I know in the next few years I'll be, you know, I'm just getting stronger and stronger, you know. And the more that I trust in Jesus, and the more that I put my mind, you know, in the Word, you know, and into godly things, you know. And and you become like a light, you know, and you shine light through others, and you still have all those, you know, things that good qualities that you learnt growing up, you know, but then you sort of, Jesus teaches you discernment, you know, and that's such a good quality to have as well, you know, because you can fall into, you know, you just see good in people, and but they don't have those same intentions, you know, and then you realize, wait a second, they're draining me, you know, they're not being real with me, you know, and there's a lot of that comes from borderline personality, you know, in the way that you overthink things, you know, and you think, you know, you either love someone or you think that they're evil, you know, and I think that God is the real and the only cure, you know, and He gives your mind rest, you know, gives your heart rest, you know, and you still grieve the things that you've lost, you know, and in life and the pain that you've been through, but you're not living with that every day anymore. You know, you don't have that baggage that you're carrying around, you know, every day. You have it, you know, your suffering turns into your testimony, and it becomes something that can help other people, you know, and you've been there, you know, and when you don't, you know, you lose the will to sort of keep going on, you know, and you're like, is this ever going to end, you know, and the struggles and it turns into, you know, like, well, look where I've come from, you know, look at the road that I was on, you know, and I remember like moments, you know, just like when I was on all the ADHD medication, like the strongest doses, overdoing it a couple times a day, you know, smoking cigarettes constantly, coffees, bad food, you know, overworking as well, so much overworking, no rest. No wonder, you know, no wonder my back went, no wonder just everything collapsed in a way, you know, and your suffering becomes your testimony, you know, becomes, that's what's happened to me, that's where I came from. If I didn't have Jesus in my life, I would be in a psych ward, you know, I'd be in a psych ward, I'd be in jail, you know, or I'd be dead. Like, one of the three, that's what was going to happen. And I could see myself in a psych ward a lot of the time, you know, I pictured myself just in a hospital bed, and it felt relaxing, you know, it felt relaxing just to be looked after by people for, you know, a couple of months, or in a rehab center, and just to be like taken care of there, you know, and no one would know, and I would just be there, you know. If I didn't have children, you know, I probably would have committed suicide, you know, the pain that I went through, you know, and the breakups and just everything, you know, and you know, I felt like I was getting manipulated, you know, by, you know, a lot of people in my life that I didn't realize it, you know, and getting drained and I, you know, and then I had no sort of good quality, you know, I had good friends, you know, but they still partied, and they still, you know, and there was still things there that just, you can't rely on your friends, you need to get it together, you know, you need to get together, and I was lucky, you know, and I think God uses people as well, you know, I had some good people, like, in hard times, you know, and I think that was, there is good people out there, you know, but that was God using people as well, you know, just to tell me that I'm here, you know, and I'm here for you, you know, and I look back and I just see how much God actually was in my life, you know, and He's been there, and He's such a good friend, you know, and we still hurt Him, you know, we still hurt Him with our mistakes sometimes, you know, and with our sin, you know, and And the more that you get closer to Jesus, and the Holy Spirit comes, in you, and in your life, and you feel way more guilt if you do that, and you feel way more like just, it stops you, and you have this peace, and you have this, like every time I've, gone back to like weed, like over this journey, like, there's a couple times, where I fall back into it for, like a month, or into cigarettes. It just instantly the peaceful feeling goes, and it's like this quick hit, of something, but it's like God's presence is gone, and He's still there, but you go into something else. You go into an idol. You go into something that is, you're trying to get your good feeling from that, and if I didn't have Jesus and God in my life, like that's what I did, that's what I did for a long time. And you're sort of in this survival mode. You're still trying to sort of, work, be a parent, be a good friend, but you just empty, just empty. You're battling with this emptiness, and that emptiness, it suffocates you. You don't even know what it is the whole time. You don't realize it's emptiness. You think it's just everyone. It feels like this, and I think a lot of people do have that emptiness, but yeah, this battle with emptiness, Jesus restores you. Jesus, it fills that empty hole, in your heart, and He changes your heart, and I look back, all the grudges that I held on to, and the people that hurt me, and and I have love for them, and I know it wasn't, I know deep down it's not intentional, and people they're suffering as well, they're suffering as well, but yeah, Jesus restores your heart, and fixes those bits, and restores the heart of stone, and gives you a heart of flesh, and I wouldn't be where I am without Him, and I think all that pain, and I look now, and like I don't know if I have, borderline personality anymore, like I still can overthink things and everything, but the more I'm in the Word, the more I have my spiritual practices going, and the more I'm on this road of purpose and meaning, like I'm a different person now, and I'm changed, and I feel it. I feel different, and the lessons that I'm learning, I just want it for everyone, anyone that has borderline personality out there, Jesus can restore you, God can restore you, and I just want that for you, because it sucks. Life without Jesus sucks, and you're feeding this false happiness. But even people with all their things, their business is going well, their family well, if you don't have Jesus, like there's still this pain, there's still this trauma, there's still this darkness, and you see it in Christians, you see it people with God in their life, and your heart's restored, and you can forgive the people that hurt you, and you can you can maybe forgive them from a distance, some, if they're still in their toxic habits, and then you can forgive them and give them love, and maybe that will be, show them some healing as well, and because I don't think people feel good about, hurting people, the things that I've done to hurt people, and like I felt terrible about that and still feel terrible about things like that. And the things I've said, I guess another symptom of personality, borderline personality, is that when I would crack it, I'd be bluntly honest, and honesty is good, but it's not balanced when you just all at once say everything. It's like you keep it in, keep it in, keep it in, and then you just explode and say everything, down to the core of, you just take someone down, and that's not a good way to deal with things, That's not a good way. That's, you're reacting, you know, it's not a godly way to deal with it. It's not a Christian way to deal with it. It's not the right way to deal with it. You feel terrible, afterwards, and all the things you said. Sometimes you can't even remember the things you said, and so it's something that I don't wish for anybody to go through. Anyone who has borderline personality or any sort of personality disorder, like, I want the healing for you, and my testimony, says and shows that the healing comes from Jesus, and you can get it, and just you just take a step towards him, and he comes into your life, and the Holy Spirit, and peace, and I have peace now, I have love and I have peace, and I don't have any of the toxic things around me, and I'm not perfect, and there's still going to be suffering, there's still going to be pain in my life, and but I have Jesus in my life, and that just makes me feel secure, that makes me feel strong, that makes me feel grounded, and I can get through anything, I feel like now, and the things I've been through are my testimony, and now I can look back and go, that was the old me, and the things that I've done to people, and I said, even if it doesn't even matter what happened to me, and it was either it was a reaction or not, it's like it's still not the right way to act. So I hope this can help somebody, and I hope I pray for you, I pray for you in your suffering, in your pain. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel like you have no one, and the suffering between the moods up and down, and the super positive, super, happy, and the super dark, and the super in your own world, and the, the behind the scenes, you sort of thinking that, all these people are out to get you as well, and there could be a little bit of that, but just putting all your energy and your mind and your focus into that, is not good for you either, and that's why it's good to just cut off from those situations in a healthy way, in not an explosion and leave, but just to step back, and then you can look at it from a more wiser perspective. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that is all that I've sort of thought about for, what's happened in my life, the borderline personality, and how God can restore you. And I hope this helps someone, and if you like this video, give it a like, and stay tuned for episode 3. Thank you. Bye.